This is episode 1 of our podcast that we don't have a name for yet. I'm Patrick with Reuben and Basil.
Hello.
And we are going to be discussing Spider-Man 2 from 2004, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst and Alfred Molina. So who wants to start the discussion? Anyone? Any takers?
Basil does.
How recently has everyone watched this movie? I haven't watched it in a pretty long time.
Patrick and I watched it last week. Week or two.
It was on the 4th of July, wasn't it? Didn't we watch it?
Yeah, we watched it on the 4th of July, and then Independence Day as well.
Maybe one of you two should start then.
In my opinion, probably the best comic book movie that's been released so far. Especially, I guess, an ability to really feel like a comic book as opposed to a movie, or sort of more how I imagine comic books a little bit. It's a lot goofier, just, a lot breezier. Sort of Avengers groupings these days, and especially the Nolan Batman films, a little bit more serious, not just story-wise, but aesthetically as well. One of my favorite parts about the Spider-Man 2 movie is all the transitions and stuff that Sam Raimi includes, the spinning newspapers and the close-ups of Spider-Man's like spider on his chest becomes like a white, and it feels very comic booky, including all of that stuff like that.
I agree that it does feel more like a comic book than the superhero movies that we have nowadays, because they're trying to make them, grittier or more realistic or whatever. But I enjoy that aspect of it. I enjoy that it's kind of campy and it's kind of not taking itself as seriously as like the Batman movies, because that feels pretty oppressive after a while. Just watching the Batman films, especially in the last Batman film.
Did you say oppressive? It feels pretty oppressive.
Oppressive. What is oppressive?
That's just how I say the word you just said.
Oppressive. Yes, oppressive. It's not oppressive. It is definitely full of joy, and there's definitely a lot of funny things thrown in there. This also, I think, some scary things too. I like how Sam Raimi intermeshes the comedy and horror of a lot of the situations. Like the scene in the hospital sticks out in my mind as sort of like it's like a classic Sam Raimi scene. Like when I think of Sam Raimi, that's what I think of. Like that,
anybody take shop class?
Yeah, a lot of zoom ins and a lot of people screaming and a lot of just mayhem.
The woman's fingernails.
Yeah, the fingernails scraping the metal off of the floor. I think that might be my favorite scene in the movie. I think you two have a different favorite scene, though. You are both big fans of the train fight in this one.
Well, my favorite scene is the cake scene, where the person. But I want to get to that later. But we seem to be talking about aesthetics, so I just want to stick with that, I guess, for a moment, which is, I think we're all in agreement that it looks more comic booky than others, and I think it seems like we all like that about it, that it fits with the narrative, that it doesn't, it's tonally fits very well, very goofy, and it's even continues with the casting, how many sort of comedic actors or comedians they cast in like small roles. There's a lot of humor in action movies tends to make me roll my eyes, but in Spider-Man 2, for whatever reason, there's a lot of moments that really work for me. The guy from Chappelle's Show yelling that he stole his pizza. He stole that dude's pizza. I love, not as much anymore, but the very first time that I saw it, I laughed so hard at the part when Spider-Man 2 is losing his powers a bit, and he has to ride the elevator with that actor, and he thinks he's in a Spider-Man costume, for like a party or something, and he's like just asking these banal questions about what it's like to wear a Spider-Man costume, and it's like just really awkwardly timed, and it's like really slow, and it's really it was especially surprising at that time because it seemed like more and more action movies were just like cut, like down to the second, sort of like every scene had to be like moving forward, and to like just have that scene and then the scene that I mentioned earlier, the cake scene, to just like have these like random like really slow scenes in the movie was just really surprising in a way that I didn't feel like I'd seen up until that point.
Yeah, when we were talking about the humor, I think one of my favorite terrible, like I laugh every time, but it's a great joke to me, is how long it takes him to put all the mops away when he's the mops will not stop falling out of the closet, and then finally he has to slam the door.
Yeah, and I also like it's Emily Deschanel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Bones.
But he delivers the pizzas to Bones. It's just like, I'm not paying for that.
And she's like smacking her gum really loudly, like this total cliche New Yorker.
Yeah, she has like this like incredible Queen's accent too. She's like, I'm not paying for that.
Use the word campy, which is something that I like, but something that the later first sort of round of Batman films gets criticized for their kind of ridiculous, the Joel Schumacher Batman films. I think we're all in agreement that the campiness of Spider-Man, to me, it doesn't feel out of place. Like it feels more like at times like he's referencing like 70s television. In particular, I'm thinking of like the musical montages. First, trying to go to see Mary Jane's play, and there's like this happy bouncy music playing. Like opens his closet, and there's only two things in his closet: a suit and a Spider-Man suit. And it's like such an obvious like metaphor for the choice he's being faced with in his life. And then like later when he's like sort of putting his life together, it's one of my favorite moments in the whole movie when he's coming out of the class and Dr. Connors is like, good job in class today or whatever, and he like throws the backpack over his shoulder and then like freeze frames on him like slightly out of focus, like looking in the camera. Like it reminds me of the opening of that show where they would like put the glove on the bottle. What show was that?
Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had forgotten about that montage, like the way it was just, it felt out of place, but it felt so fun, too, because it was just like, I can't believe how different this movie is from all the other superhero movies you're seeing now today, like, just like to have a callback that obvious to 70s TV, like that's exactly what I thought about too when I saw it. I was like, yeah, it's like a 70s TV show. It's like the ending of the opening of a 70s TV show. You know, it's like Three's Company or something. Even though I know you don't like Three's Company, but that's what it felt like it belonged in. It was like a show.
I like the opening of Three's Company. I just don't like the idea of the show. The theme song in the opening is hilarious. That's like, come and knock on my door. That's great.
That's an awesome song.
And I guess that's even continued with his ridiculously stereotyped landlord, who's always asking him for the rent. Rent? And he's just like, he shows up like when he's going to the bathroom, and he's like, rent? Rent? You have rent for me? Yeah, this goofy, it's a great world that Sam Raimi has built, and all of the elements really fit in, There's no point at which I'm like, I feel like, oh, this character shouldn't be here, or this scene is really atonal with the rest of the film. If you don't like that goofiness, I can understand. But everything sort of fits in together. From what's his name's portrayal of J. Jonah Jameson.
J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, J.K. Simmons is right on the money for that type of J. Jonah Jameson. I think everyone loves him in that. I love at the end of the movie when he realizes that his son's not going to get married, and he leans over to his wife and he's like, tell the caterer not to open the caviar. It's like, there's no moment in the film, and there's no moment with J. Jonah Jameson where he's not willing to make like a snide remark or like a goofy joke, or like he doesn't care that his son has probably just been devastated by being left at the altar. He cares about the caviar not being opened.
Costs money, expensive.
I just don't see that kind of consistency in comic book movies these days. It's like they want to move back and forth, like, I kind of liked Man of Steel, but like, when they're fighting at the end, they like throw a goofy joke like in the middle of this big fight. There's a sign that says like so many days since there's been an accident, and they like knock over the sign. I was like, this is not funny. It wasn't a good joke, and it was like
It's a really old joke too.
Yeah, in a really bad place. It's one of the things that I like most about Spider-Man 2 is that it just really seemed to have those beats down. It knew when not to make jokes and when to make jokes, and it was able to be a goofy, fun ride. I think regardless of whether or not you want to take it like as seriously as I think Basil and I do for other aspects of it, I just think that it definitely deserves praise for being that consistent, for just not really having any of those just awful moment-ruining jokes, but just becoming more and more common in action movies and in superhero movies.
Since we only seem to talk praise about movies so far, I think we all like it, certainly, but I will say that the one thing that we discussed when we were watching it together was that the CG in it looks really dated. You said even for the time when it came out, it looked a little off. Just in some of the fight scenes, like when they're doing the CG Spider-Man like flying through traffic or jumping up and like kicking Doc Ock in the face, it just looks a little too uncanny valley, I guess is what the term is, like where it's almost human, but you can tell that it's not quite, so it looks a little weird.
Basil was the one who told me about the money and the CGI once. Maybe he wants to comment on that.
I mean, I think what I've heard is that Sony Pictures was relatively new when they made the first Spider-Man, and so they were kind of putting a team together. And even by the time Spider-Man 2 came around, they just didn't have the pedigree and like time investment that something like Industrial Light and Magic or the big famous CG houses had. So they were always sort of, at least at that point, I don't know if it's gotten better, a step behind in terms of being able to push the envelope and deliver stuff that's really brand new looking. Yeah, even at the time it looked not as good as other movies with similar budget sizes, but for me, I think because of the tone of the movie, it doesn't I think it bothered me more the first time I saw it, but then with subsequent viewings, I think it hasn't bothered me. And that there isn't, I think it would be more distracting. They usually go with practical type effects during the more serious scenes in the movie, which are supposed to be more emotionally affecting, and I think that helps balance it out, where if it was a whole lot of weird CGI going on and that didn't look that good and it was supposed to be emotionally hitting you at the same time, it might not work, but that's just me.
For me personally, the kineticism of those scenes also keeps me in it. Like the bad CGI isn't that distracting because the movement of those scenes tends to be so good. I noticed it just seems like in Spider-Man 2 that they've drawn off of Kung Fu films a little bit more than some of the other superhero movies, and just there's like parts of the environment that are used consistently. Like, I rewatched The Avengers pretty recently, and like Thor pretty much just hits things with his hammer, for instance, and it's like nothing, it's, they're in another environment, but it's basically like one of those like play sets where the environment is just completely still, and then you have like the little paper dolls that you play in front of it. Like that's what the Avengers action scenes feel like to me. But we just rewatched the train scene before you showed up, Basil, and like there's like a big clock, and they break the hands off of it and they throw it at each other. Or they're the first scene, Dr. Octopus is throwing the bags of money at Spider-Man, and he throws a table from the bank at Spider-Man, and then they're on the trains, and like a lot of times in action scenes, like something comes up that's gonna hit somebody else and they have to avoid it, and they think it's more tense, for it to be like shown coming for like a really long time, and it's like, how are they gonna avoid that or something like that. But I like in Spider-Man 2, they're fighting and then they both duck, like both Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man 2 duck, or Spider-Man duck, and then like you see the thing like go by, so it's like you won't get only a split second to react to it, and you're like, whoa, like it's really surprising. I thought it did a really good job, like environmentally, of making it like really energized in that way. And even like little things, there's like he's constantly using like his web not to just like trap stuff, but like to steady himself on things, and like they didn't need to include that. That we would have just perfectly believed that he could jump on top of a train and stop. We probably wouldn't have been that confused by it. But adding like those little details, and I feel like they're constantly throughout the film, just makes the action scenes, for me, work really well. I agree that the CGI is kind of goofy, but I get sort of lost in it, and it ends up not being a huge detractor for me. Like I said to Patrick, the train sequence is one of, if not my favorite action scene of like the past 10 years, just because from beginning to end, they're just using the environment well. The shots are really kinetic and moving. This, the sound like comes in and out in like really good ways. And I love the way that they do Spider-Man in all of the movies. Like he doesn't move like a spider very much. He kind of moves like a big dog, like a young dog who's not like completely aware of like what it can do. Like he's always like, Tobey Maguire, first of all, he's always like screaming while he's doing everything. He's kind of like, whoa, whoa, which adds to it. And he's like always like, it always seems like he's not quite doing 100% what he's trying to do. Like he's 2 inches too low when he's jumping over a building, or he like jumps a foot too far. And stuff like that, really, I love stuff like that, because an action scene isn't just, they don't drop character when the action scene starts. And stuff like that, I really love. So like what we've come to know Peter Parker as is like this goofy, person who's not totally in control of his life yet, and like that, those aspects of his character end up extending to the action sequence. I love little details like that.
I actually prefer the bank fight scene to the train fight sequence. I don't know, something about it's a thing they do in the first Spider-Man movie as well. It's where the city is sort of standing up for Spider-Man. I like that idea, kind of, but it always feels a little too
patriotic. It was a post 9/11 response.
Yeah, I got that, especially in the first one, because it was people on the bridge and they're just like, hey, leave Spider-Man alone, get out of here, he's one of us. I don't know, something about that feels weird to me when they do it in the second movie too, because they have all the people on the train standing up for him, which, it makes sense because he just saved them all, but I always get a little, I don't know how, like, I feel weird when movies do that, because I'm like, yeah, but the villain could just kind of like easily kill all these people, and so if I was a person standing there, like I might not, like run into this, into this fight with this villain who I know.
In the second movie, it's critiquing the first movie. I think the first movie he was forced to include that. Like I don't know if you remember, but the original Spider-Man, like just teaser trailer was like him capturing some helicopters between the World Trade Center. So like 9/11 happened like between when they started making Spider-Man and when they finished making Spider-Man, and they had to like take that trailer down. It was like one of the big things, and so I think some producer or something sort of pushed to have that scene included. And then in the second movie, when it happens, like first of all, like a number of the people who step up and are like, if you want to get to Spider-Man, you have to go through us, have like huge amounts of like fear on their face. Like one of them is like really over the top, like making like a gulping noise, going like, and then they don't help. That's the thing. Like in the first one, like them throwing like the sticks and stuff, like momentarily distracts the Green Goblin and helps Spider-Man out. But in this one, they just say you have to go through us, and then he's like, okay, and then he just pushes them all out of the way and like almost does kill some of them, like almost knocks some of them out of the train. So to me, I felt like if they gave Sam Raimi more control for the second one, because the first one had made some money, and he was like, that part was stupid, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew that wasn't me. Like I feel like that's the only reason why that's included in the second one. Like he references, I feel like it's a callback to the first one and how he didn't like that moment. I mean, that might be giving Sam Raimi a lot of credit, but I don't know. How do you feel about that, Basil?
I think I agree with what you're saying in terms of it being funny, but I think it's also, at least for me, like touching in a way, because I think that that's sort of part of the point, is that like they don't know whether they're gonna die doing that, but like that makes it even more sort of like kind of awesome and brave of them. They're like, we don't have superpowers, but we're like people who care about each other, and we're gonna risk our lives to do something that we think is right. And, you know, like, I don't know, I think that kind of makes the movie have a more kind of nice, like, I think it's one of the reasons why I like it so much is that, like, yeah, Spider-Man has these superpowers and he's taking huge risks by doing what he's doing, but, like, it's almost an even cooler risk and more inspiring to see, like, people who don't have the privilege of, like, superpowers taking it upon themselves to be like, hey, let's try and do what we can. Even if it doesn't work, it's still important to not just let something horrible happen because you're afraid of the consequences.
I feel like, I do feel like it's a critique in that moment, but I think that sort of what you're getting at and something that I really agree with and really like about this movie is that it's not just completely about Peter and Mary Jane and Harry. We haven't mentioned James Franco yet, who's probably because it's something that I don't think any of us particularly like about this movie, but they are kind of the three main characters. Is that it's not just about them. The background is given a voice in a way. The people whose lives are being put at risk while these super beings, you know, fight on their trains are allowed to speak, and it's not just to like happily clap along, you know.
I will say that is something that I do like, that I'm liking less and less now in movies, because I see more and more of just like random destruction of the background, and you don't ever, like, it's not even acknowledged that hundreds of people are probably dying in that building that's falling down over there, you know, in like Star Trek or in Man of Steel. And so I do like what you're saying, and it just hit me that that's kind of what's been bothering me about a lot of movies that have been made recently, is that you don't get to hear from, you know, the background people. And I do like that in this movie. There's almost always some bystander, like, standing there beside Spider-Man, like, wow, that's the thing that happened. And, you know, and Spider-Man always has something funny to say to them, you know, like the little kid.
Don't play in the streets, kids.
Yeah. The little kid who was like, wow, how'd you do that? He's like, oh, just eat my vegetables. He's like, wow, that's what my mom keeps telling me, but I never believe her. There are a lot of scenes like that, and I agree. I like the background characters. I also just love, like, there are little scenes too during the fight scene in the bank. I remember where
Joel McHale.
Yeah, I was saying Joel McHale, but where Doc Ock's throwing the money at him, and then there's
another great comedy
money
actor thrown into that movie for like 5 minutes.
There's just like coins in the ground. He's like reaching for them, and Aunt May reaches out to slaps his hand. I was like, that's a great, like, that character has some life to him. Like, there's some inner life to this sort of background, like, goofball who won't give him a loan. It's like, that's very funny. And it's also, like, perfectly in line with Aunt May's character, too. I just love that reversal of, like, he won't give them a loan, and then he's, like, reaching out for money, and Aunt May's, like, slapping his hand away from it.
I think what we're getting at, we can start to move into themes here a little bit. One of my favorite parts of this movie is that, maybe theme's not the right word, but the things in other movies which are invisible and aren't given a voice are allowed to, you know, make decisions or speak or weigh in on what's happening. You know, Spider-Man is the protagonist, and the movie centers around his decisions and his action, but people get the chance to respond to it in a way that, you know, they don't in Batman. You know, Batman movies, the first one is just about Batman. The second one, the Joker gets some agency as well. But pretty much everyone is just like, whoa, Batman, like, constantly. And we don't really know what's going on with them very much at all. But in every scene, like, you get to find out more about people for, like, every character. Dr. Octopus has that nice moment, you know, where he's having tea with Peter Parker, you know, before he becomes Dr. Octopus, and his wife, telling it, you know, about how he fell in love with her and, like, why he loves her. That's not in any other superhero movie where, like, you see the villain before they're a villain talking about their human side. Aunt May in the first movie, and at the first half of the second movie, she's someone who needs to be saved, and that's, like, the only role that she plays for Peter Parker is someone that he has to protect. And it seems like it's going that direction again when he finds the, like, late loan notice among her mail, and then she decides to move out of the house herself. She makes that decision, and she has control of her life, and it's really how it is for every character. And that scene that I referenced earlier, the sharing the cake scene, there's this, the landlord has this daughter who lives across the hall from Peter Parker and his little tenement building. She seems like she's just there for comic relief. She's this little stick thing, and she's setting things on fire and falling over, and she's just supposed to be like this, goofy person that we're just laughing at. And then he comes home and he's really sad. I can't remember about what. But he's just super sad about something, and she's like, do you want to have some chocolate cake? And they don't even really say anything to each other. They just sit there and they're eating cake, and there's like this weird, happy, calm moment between the two of them. And you get to see this like interior life of this person who would totally be ignored in most superhero movies because they're not important enough. And that's really strange, non-narrative focused inclusion for me gets to so much of what I really appreciate personally about this movie. Just that really every character, even characters who are only in it for a minute or two, are treated really humanely. Everyone gets to have a voice. They're not just, used for a joke or to represent danger, because they're in physical trouble or whatever. It's just really rare in superhero movies especially, but in all movies. Okay, well, then I have one more theme that I would talk about, which is the idea of adolescence and of extended adolescence in our current society, that kids stay at home longer, are not expected to integrate into the real world as quickly as they used to. I don't know about lifespan comparatively. Maybe percentage-wise we're actually the exact same. It's just a thing that people cooked up, to make kids feel bad for no reason. But it's certainly a topic, and it's something that people talk about, and I think that it's an important part of Spider-Man 2. The movie starts with the three main characters, Harry, Peter, and Mary Jane, have all taken on certain adult responsibilities, and they've taken them on not because they want them, but because it makes them adult. They feel like they have to for one reason or another. So Mary Jane is engaged, or soon to be engaged, with is his name James Jameson or Jim? The astronaut, J. Jonah Jameson's son.
I don't remember what his name was. Let me look it up real quick.
But she's engaged to him, and Harry has taken over the company and trying to live up to his father's model. And then, of course, Peter is Spider-Man. And he's trying to do everything. That's, the first whole act of the film is him trying and failing to pursue Mary Jane and be Spider-Man and go to school and hold down a pizza job and take pictures, and it's just too much. And I think that a lot of sort of young college-age people can identify with that feeling of they go to college and they have this infinite freedom and they try to do everything that interests them. They want to save the world, and they also want to have a social life, and they also want to get their education, and they also want to be prepared, to work in the real world. And they're doing it because, that's the whole theme of the first one, is with great power comes great responsibility. So it's kind of like, if you have this ability, you have to use it, otherwise you're being selfish, is kind of the implication of the first one. And I think the second one is about how maybe that's wrong, and that if you do something because you have to, you won't be good at it. And if you do something because you love it, you will, and that things will work better for you. I mean, that's I love that scene. It's so funny when he goes to see the doctor, and he's like, I've been having this dream. And he's like, oh, but it's not my dream, it's a friend's dream. Where I'm Spider-Man, and I keep falling off walls. I can't produce webs anymore. And the doctor's like, well, maybe you don't want to be Spider-Man. And you can just like see on Tobey Maguire's face, like this is a revelation to him. He's like, what? Because he's been doing it because he has to, and it's like such a toll on him because he doesn't want to at that point. He's a kid who's in love with a girl, and he's he can't make those kinds of adult choices because he's not an adult yet. This is driven home even further in that subway scene when he saves them and he's sitting there, without his mask on, and the dad looks down at him and he goes, he's just a kid, no older than my son. And I think you get these great, like, 3 different paths with the characters over the course of Spider-Man 2. You've got Harry, who, like, continues to sort of force these, like, trappings of adulthood without having actually, been able to achieve them. And so he gets, like, more and more childish and wrapped up in these things as he tries to become this person who he isn't yet. And then Mary Jane, of course, almost marries the wrong guy.
His name is John, by the way.
John Jameson. And then, there's the whole, almost all of the second act. Peter Parker is not Spider-Man because he can't handle that with all of the other things. He becomes Spider-Man again when he wants to, when Mary Jane's in trouble and when he really wants to save the people who are in danger. That sort of a more adult way of looking at things, in my opinion, is then even continued with and sort of going back to the invisibility thing. Love interests in superhero movies tend to be there to serve the superheroes' interests. They handle their daily business affairs, or they keep them from becoming alcoholic, or they provide love, and they don't really have their own lives. But an important part of Spider-Man 2 is that the conclusion is actually Mary Jane's, not Peter Parker's. His big realization comes at the end of Act 2, and then her realization comes in the last couple minutes when she's like, I know the risks, I'm going to make my own decision, which is to accept the risks, for possible true love. And, it's nice to see the woman making the decision and, like, not being won by the man, and, like, him accepting that she can make her own decisions and not, like, telling her, like Batman does, I'm pretty sure several times in both of the first 2 Batman movies, that he's like it's too risky to love him, you have to stay away. Like, he's constantly telling, the woman to stay away, and it's like, Spider-Man does that, and then Mary Jane's like, that's stupid. I can make my own decisions about, whether or not to put myself in harm's way. You don't have to make them for me. That's reinforced by Danny Elfman's score, and maybe the only time that I've ever enjoyed an Elfman score in any movie. He swings away, and then the final shot of the film is Mary Jane in the window, and there's like a strong minor chord played underneath her, sort of looking out the window, and that's the final shot of the film.
Do we want to talk about, I guess, the people who made the film, just sort of in general, like how we feel about them, or do we want to just stick to the topic of what they do in this film? I'm wondering, like, do we ever want to...
I mean, this is a very Sam Raimi film, so if people want to talk about Sam Raimi and how it affects this film, it's fine by me. I'm sure we'll watch films eventually where the style is not so clear, but I mean, he's calling back to his own movies and Spider-Man 2, so I mean, it definitely makes sense, with the consistent inclusion of Bruce Campbell, and the hospital scene that you mentioned earlier is basically straight out of Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, I was wondering when we were going to bring up Darkman, because I did, like, for some reason I saw that movie when I was much younger, and it still stuck with me, like how weird all the stuff in it was. And I've gone back and watched a few scenes from it, and it's just, it fits this film so much. I was like, it's weird. It was like Sam Raimi was trying to make a new superhero in the vein of, I guess, Tim Burton's Batman, kind of, because that's what was big at the time. And then it's funny to see him actually get a real superhero later and just kind of work that same magic, in this movie. Which I don't know that Darkman's really that great a film. I haven't watched all of it recently, but it still does a lot of those same tricks where it's kind of half serious, half scary sometimes. So I definitely get a lot of Darkman from this movie.
Even with all the genre bending that happens in Spider-Man 2, all of the emotional moments, except for maybe some of Harry's, really hit for me at every part. So it doesn't pull away from those moments for me. If anything, like, it makes them stronger. Just like, it'll be so goofy 1 second, and then, like, for instance, when Dr. Octopus's wife dies during the experiment to create the renewable energy fusion. There's that scene outside where the cops are like talking about what happened, and like you just see her like off to the side like briefly for a moment, and then the like EMTs like pull the sheet over her so you can't see her, and it's just like this little moment of like, oh, like she's really dead, like, and they show it, and like and like it's allowed to hit, and there's an emotional moment given to that death.
I guess, are we all in agreement that James Franco is the weak link in this cast? Like, he's just, as an actor, he's just doesn't do anything interesting with Harry the way that the other people seem to do with the other characters, because I feel like Alfred Molina's doing a great job as Dr. Octopus, sort of kind of being bent in a way by the mechanical arms, where I just love a lot of his the over the shoulder looks that he does, where he just like turns to the camera over his shoulder and he's like giving the camera this really evil look. But then other times you kind of see the humanity slide back into him, and he's like, what am I doing? But I really liked his performance as Dr. Octopus, and I thought that he's his own and that's a good thing about a villain, is like he's his own protagonist. He's doing his own thing. He's got his own trajectory going on. He doesn't really care about Spider-Man, other than Spider-Man gets in his way sometimes. And like, even when he captures Spider-Man, it's a means to an end. It's like, I'll get Spider-Man for you. You give me the I forget what the element is that he needs to get from Harry.
Unobtainium.
Unobtainium. But he's always like, he's on his own trajectory the whole time. Spider-Man's just like a roadblock. So Spider-Man is his antagonist, basically.
I enjoy all of the acting in it, but especially Kirsten Dunst. All of the acting except for James Franco. But I think Kirsten Dunst is actually my favorite performance, and she has a really tender quality. I remember the moment when Peter actually shows up to her show. He surprises her, and like she can't remember her lines for the play. When he does it, she's so taken aback that there was like real sweetness to that and to her character. She really did that girl next door, like, archetype just to a T perfectly.
I would also like to add that I feel like Dr. Octopus's mechanical arms outact James Franco in this movie. I like the amount of personality the arms all had, because they're always like, it's like they're like talking to Dr. Octopus, and they're like, and it's like that arm just made a joke to Dr. Octopus, and but I really did like that they each seemed to have their own kind of personality, and they weren't just like mechanical limbs swinging around. That was something that I don't think that I've ever seen that much personality put into like a piece of technology, I guess, in a movie, or something that's not inherently meant to be a character, I guess. It's like, it's weird. It's I don't know how to explain it exactly.
I will say this about James Franco is that he makes perfect sense to be Willem Dafoe's son for me, which is because I imagine both of them like screaming and jumping up and down like a lot. And we should point out that what Dr. Octopus is doing, even though he's failed, is trying to create clean, renewable energy that will last forever. So the goal that he's obsessed with, which, you know, it just turns out that he can't achieve, is actually an incredibly helpful one. He's not like a villain who just wants to destroy the city because it's funny. He does have that one line that sort of hints at the part of him that does want control, where he says, "The power of the sun in the palm of my hand." So I mean, I think that's the part of him that's why he doesn't become Spider-Man when he has, you know, the trouble. It's because there's a small part of him that wants that, or that, you know, that's, you know, his Achilles heel, I guess. But his, you know, like I said, what he wants to do is to help the city. That's just not really true of any of the other villains that I can think of, unless you want to maybe say Ra's al Ghul in the first one would help the city by destroying it, by eliminating everything that's bad about Gotham, flooding it with death. I guess if you want to argue that helps them, you could do that. And what you were saying about the mask too, I think it makes him part of the city. It's not like Spider-Man and New York. It's like he's a New Yorker. He's another face in the crowd. He's a person, and you know, he's not their hero. He's another person who has a particular set of skills, trying to help, you know, where he can. And
I think we've said everything there is for us to say about Spider-Man 2.
Sounds good to me.
Alright, this is the end of podcast 1, and I am going to press stop.